Hello everyone, it's Mafalda and welcome back to a new video, and today I'm going to be discussing about some of my recent reads. I did a video like this a couple of months ago about some of the books that I had read between the months of January and April, and now I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I read between May and August. So the next 4 months. Like I had said in that previous video that I'm gonna leave in the cards up here, I am not gonna talk about every single book that I've read because I feel like that would be way too long of a video and also just not interesting, because some books I just honestly have no thoughts other than good or not good, and they just didn't leave a mark enough for me to talk about them here. So today I'm going to be talking about 8 of those books that I read between May and August, and let's just get started. And the first book that I would like to talk about is Paper Names by Susie Liu. And this is a story about immigration. This is a story about a Chinese family that moves to the US. And they kind of have to start fresh, and it's a couple and a young daughter. And the father of the family, who is called Tony, was once an engineer in China, but once he moves to the US with his family, he has to find a job as a doorman. And through that job, he meets this young man who is a lawyer and who's called Oliver, I think. Oliver is very handsome and he has a lot of money and a lot of power, but he also has a lot of secrets. And one day a violent attack occurs in the place that Oliver lives and that Tony works at, and it kind of intertwines the family's lives with this young man's life, and the story kind of follows from there. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I do gotta say that the audiobook gripped me from start to finish. It was just such a good audiobook. I don't know if it was just also because of the mood I was in. I was just in an audiobook mood, but I flew through this audiobook. But I did have some issues with the book overall. First of all, the fact that it wasn't chronological, because the story does, that's something I didn't mention, the story does go back in time to when the family was in China, and then it jumps forward to when the young girl from the family is a bit older. It just jumps a lot between times and places, and my little pea brain can't handle that. I do prefer when books, either nonfiction or fiction, are chronological. It makes sense in my head. I do sometimes see the purpose of doing a story not chronologically. Sometimes it does benefit the plot and it's done with a purpose at the end. But in this case, I just felt like it could have been done in order, or at least more in order, because it did have some very big time jumps all over the place, going back and forth, and yeah, it just confused me. I had to change out my battery, so hopefully the framing doesn't look too different. But another thing that I didn't really enjoy about the book is that there is a relationship that really irked me, because there is a really big age difference, without giving spoilers, trying to at least. But yeah, that is also something that I just didn't see the purpose of being there, and it just made me uncomfortable. But overall, I did enjoy the book. I especially loved getting to know the characters, and I felt like they were really fleshed out, at least in my head they were, and I loved seeing them interact with each other. And the book just made me think of how much immigrant parents have to sacrifice for their families and their loved ones to provide them a better life. And I really enjoyed the book overall. I felt like there were some things that could have been improved, and I also think I would have benefited personally to read this book physically instead of reading it through the audiobook. Like I said at the beginning, I did enjoy the audiobook, but there were some things that maybe I definitely missed because I was listening to the audiobook. So maybe one day I'll pick up the physical version and give it a reread. But overall, it was a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I would like to talk about is actually one that I've already mentioned on this channel, I think in my mid-year book freakout tag, and it is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. And I did finally read it this year, and it really surprised me. Like I've said before, I was going into the book with very, very low expectations because when the book came out in 2020, people were not happy with the book, and a lot of the first reviews of the people reading it back then were just not positive at all. So I just decided not to pick it up. And I honestly thought I would never pick up the book. But then the trailer for the movie that is coming out this year came out. And I was just so curious because the trailer looks really, really good. And so I decided to pick up the audiobook for this one. And like I said, it really surprised me. Is it better than the original trilogy? Obviously not, but it's still a really entertaining book. And if you don't know, this book is about President Snow, and it's kind of a prequel to the original trilogy, and it's just about I don't know the number of the Hunger Games, but it's one of the first few Hunger Games, and it's about how President Snow kind of changed the Hunger Games and made it as we know in the original trilogy. And like I said, the book was entertaining. I did listen to the audiobook, and the audiobook was also pretty great. I did like the characters. I felt like it did the original trilogy justice. And yeah, I think it stands pretty good on its own. And I had really low expectations, so maybe that's why I liked it so much, because I was just expecting the worst, but it really wasn't. I just felt like maybe it dragged on a little bit towards the end of the book. I really wasn't expecting the book to go on for so long after something happened. I'm not gonna say. It dragged on maybe a little bit, but honestly, I'm excited for the movie. I will be watching, I will be seated, and yeah, it's gonna be fun. And I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I would like to talk about is American Betiya by Anuradha D. Rajurkar. I'm probably mispronouncing this, I'm so sorry. And this book follows Rani, who is probably the perfect student and the perfect daughter, and she has never lied to her parents, but then she meets Oliver, who is probably her parents' worst nightmare. He has tattoos, he's really charismatic, he's really passionate about his art, and yeah, Rani falls in love with Oliver, and they start secretly dating because Rani knows that if her parents know, she's completely dead. So they start dating in secret, but then Oliver's home life is not really great, and Rani starts to give all of herself to try and help him, but at the same time she can never give him anything in return in terms of meeting her family or anything, because they have to keep it a secret. And the story kind of follows from there, and I do gotta say that this is probably one of my favorite books of the year. Probably top 5, I don't know if top 3, probably top 5, yeah. I think I also mentioned this one on my mid-year book freakout tag as one of my favorites, and this was so surprising because I have been reading some YAs and they haven't really been great, but this one was just right up my alley, and it kind of restored my faith in YA. I think this book just encapsulated first love so well, in my opinion, because it's just that feeling of wanting to give everything to this person because this person means so much to you, even if that kind of compromises who you are and your identity. I love the conversations here on identity and first love and fetishization. I can't say that word, I'm probably saying it wrong. And even though romance was kind of at the center of the story, I felt like it wasn't really the central focus of the book. The central focus was just Rani's own self-discovery and how this relationship impacts herself and how she views herself and her culture. And yeah, it was just so interesting. I really liked the characters except for Oliver. He was a shithead, and I know that's kind of the point of the book, but yeah, he was just the worst. And I also loved how the characters were flawed and it was just in your face, especially Rani. She made a lot of mistakes throughout the book, but she was just like learning and growing from them, and it was just so beautiful to see. So yeah, I really like this book. I feel like it's very underrated. online. I feel like I've never seen anyone really talk about this book, so please check it out. Even if you don't really read YA, I feel like you're still going to take something from this, especially about first love. I feel like that was such a well done part of this book, and I ended up giving American Betiya 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I would like to talk about is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, and this is a romance book, and it is set in New York, and it follows our main character August, who is 23, and she has never been in love, and she kind of wants to turn her life around in New York because she just moved there. So she finds an apartment with roommates to live with, and she also gets a job at a diner, which makes her ride the subway every single day to go to work. And on this commute to work on the subway, she always sees the same girl, who is this beautiful and mysterious punk rock chick named Jane, and they one day strike up a conversation, and they start kind of like being with each other every day on the commute. But things become complicated when August realizes that Jane is actually stuck in the subway since the 1970s, and she's actually just existing in that subway and she can't leave. And so August decides to try and help Jane finally leave the subway and try to get her back to where she belongs in the 1970s. I think it's always risky to try and include time traveling in a contemporary book because it's bound to have some inconsistencies and some just like plot holes, and this book did have some of those, which is always frustrating as a reader to kind of like be like, that doesn't make sense. So that's something that I did not enjoy about this book, but I did enjoy the connection between Jane and August. I just really loved their romance, but at the same time, I don't want to sound harsh, I guess, but I felt like Jane was maybe a bit too, I don't know, accepting of some things that were mentioned about the 2020s or just like the present day. And it also kind of took me out of the story because I'm not saying that lesbians in the 1970s were accepting, but were they accepting of everything? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm misjudging Jane and I just want her to be terrible, but she wasn't, so I guess that's good. But other than the inconsistencies with the time traveling and stuff, I did enjoy this book, and I did enjoy how the two characters of August and Jane were so connected, and we found out about those connections along with the book. And I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but I wasn't expecting what happened at the end of the book, but I did enjoy it, and I did like how this book ended. And I'm trying not to give any spoilers right now, but yeah, I did enjoy the ending, and I did like the characters, but there were still some things that kind of felt unrealistic and also inconsistent to me. So I ended up giving this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I would like to talk about is Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell by Taj McCoy, and I listened to this one on audiobook, and I do gotta say it wasn't really my favorite. This book follows our main character Savvy, and she goes through a really bad breakup, and so she decides to kind of get in control of her life and eat better and exercise more. And Savvy also inherited a kitchen from her grandmother, who passed down her love for cooking, and that kitchen is falling apart, and Savvy also takes into her hands to find someone to help her renovate the kitchen and bring it back to life. And the whole book is just, like I said, Savvy trying to regain control of her life and make herself a better person. And I do agree with all of that, but the whole part, which is a big chunk of the book, about getting a revenge body, I guess, for her ex, and just like eating better and working out and getting thinner. So if you struggle with disordered eating, I definitely wouldn't recommend this book because it talks a lot about how much she exercised. There's actually one point where she passes out from exercising too much, and it was just really honestly difficult to listen to. And this is a rom-com. It's supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to be cute and fun. And honestly, that whole part of the book about her trying to get a revenge body just really took me out of the story, and I couldn't really connect with the romance of the book, which was like, undoubtedly it was cute and I did like the main love interest, but it just took me out of the story, the whole part about exercising. And it also wasn't something that I was expecting with this book. I did read kind of the plot of the book, but I was kind of expecting at the end or even the middle of the book for her to realize that what she was doing was just not good and it was really unhealthy actually. And I'm not saying that exercising and eating better isn't healthy, I'm just saying that her mindset for doing that is truly unhealthy, and I just wanted her to have a bigger conversation about that, and I feel like she does at the end, but it's still not what I would have wanted with the book and with the character of Savvy. So yeah, that really bummed me out. So I ended up giving this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. Filming this while the sun is going down is never a good idea, but I always do it. So I'm just gonna have to speed through the next few books because otherwise I'm gonna be filming in complete darkness. So let's just go. The next book that I would like to talk about is by The Hidden Culture, History, and Science of Bisexuality by Julia Shaw. And this is a nonfiction book about bisexuality, and it was just so interesting to me. Something that I always struggled with nonfiction books like this is the organization of the chapters and the sub-chapters, but I do gotta say that I loved the organization of this, and that is something that I will not say that I did not enjoy because the book was really well sectioned, so that's a plus. The first few chapters though, or the first chapter? Yeah, I think it was only the first chapter and the first few sub-chapters, I do gotta say that were a bit boring because it was about the history of bisexuality, and it is relevant, but also it wasn't really that interesting. So that was the only part that I just didn't really like about the book. But other than that, I really enjoyed reading this book and learning more about bisexuality. I felt like it was such a well condensed book about every aspect of bisexuality that you can think of. And I also loved how Julia Shaw sometimes talked about her life and her experience as a bisexual person, and I also really liked those personal touches in this nonfiction book. But I also liked how it wasn't always the central focus of the book about her story personally. It was just sprinkled in throughout the book in the right amount and at the right time, so I felt like it was a really good balance of history and research and also personal stories. And yeah, I just really honestly enjoyed this book. I have, other than the first part being a bit too boring, I have nothing to add. So yeah, this was a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I would like to talk about is actually one that I've been meaning to read for a really long time, and that is Lore Olympus Volume 1 by Rachel Smith. Ever since I kind of finished reading Saga, I've read all of the volumes up until the one that was published this year or last year. I have been meaning to pick up another graphic novel series, and so I decided to pick up Lore Olympus because I've seen it everywhere on BookTube for years and I've been really curious about it. So yeah, it's time to read this one. And this book is about Persephone and Hades, the Greek gods, falling in love in this kind of like city setting. I really don't know how to explain it, but I do gotta say that the illustrations in this are absolutely beautiful. The illustrations have really bright colors and it's all in tones of like pinks and blues and purples, and I just really like the illustrations. I also really like the dialogue in this between the characters because I honestly don't know why. Maybe it's because of the cover, or maybe it's because I've seen a lot of people on BookTube talk about this book, but I thought this was more towards a younger audience, but it really isn't. And I love that, to be honest, because it kind of reminds me of Saga in a way, in terms of like how adult the talks are between the characters. And how mature it is. So yeah, I really like that aspect of the story. But yeah, overall, I really liked this book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I am really excited to read the rest of the volumes that are out so far. So yeah, I'm excited to pick up volume 2. And the last book that I want to talk about in this video is Outline by Rachel Cusk, and I do gotta say, I gotta be honest, the cover is what attracted me to this book. I honestly had no idea what it talked about, but I had seen some Rachel Cusk covers around in bookstores because they all have like this white border around like a picture, and I had seen them, but I just saw this one and I thought I have to read this during the summer, it just feels right. So I picked it up and I read it, and it was okay, I guess. So one of the things that I mainly liked about this book is the writing. I really liked Rachel Cusk's writing and how it flows. It flows really well. I don't know how else to explain it. So I will definitely pick up more of Rachel Cusk's work in the future. But what I guess struggled with this book is that the story is about a professor who is going to Greece to teach a creative writing class. And the book basically is split into, I don't know if it's 10 chapters, but she has conversations with 10 different people. And it's basically just her talking to these people that she meets along the way going to Greece. And then in Greece, she meets a bunch of people there as well. So it's just conversations. The book is just 10 different conversations. And the bad thing about that is that if you don't really like a conversation, you just have to sit through it. So that's what I really struggled with this book, is that I did enjoy some of the conversations. There were some things that I even tabbed that I thought were just great discussions on relationships and art and just kind of productivity as well. But then there were just some other chapters where she was talking to someone and I just wasn't really connected with what they were saying and the character itself, so I just was kind of like bored, I guess. So it really depended on the chapter and the person that the main character was talking to. So yeah, overall it was an okay read. I will definitely check out more of her books, especially because after reading this I found out that this is the first book in a trilogy. I don't know if the books are all connected per se, but I do gotta research about that. But yeah, this is the first book in a trilogy, I guess. So I don't know if the other books are gonna be the same kind of like format of just conversations, or I don't know, I have to research. But yeah, I guess I will pick up the second book after this one and I'll see if I like it more or not. But I ended up giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. So that concludes my recent reads for May, June, July, and August. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you've read any of the books that I talked about today, please leave a comment saying which one and what you thought of them. And I will see you guys on my next one. Bye!